Pressure is growing for a boycott in Florida, including Latino truck drivers who vow to stop deliveries across the entire state of Florida. And on June 1st, many Florida businesses shuttered their doors for the day in an immigrant labor strike to protest Governor Ron DeSantis' sweeping new immigration law. The Republican presidential hopeful has railed against U.S. immigration policies and newly arrived asylum seekers for year after year. Florida Senate Bill 1718, which takes effect on July 1st, will offer a preview of the controversial changes DeSantis has said he'd like to see Congress implement if he actually becomes president. Among its provisions, the strict new state legislation in Florida limits social services for undocumented immigrants, allocates millions more tax dollars to expand DeSantis' migrant relocation program, invalidates driver's licenses issued to undocumented people by other states, and requires hospitals to get Medicaid dollars to ask for a patient's immigration status. All of this, by the way, there will be a lawsuit on July 2nd because all of this likely is in violation of the Interstate Commerce Clause of the U.S. Constitution, where each state has to obey the laws of other states in terms of interstate commerce, as well as, so for people who don't know, the Interstate Commerce Clause is what the federal government used to invalidate the Jim Crow laws during the civil rights movement in the 1960s, to say that, for example, you can't discriminate against people because of their color of their skin. It's in violation. Federal government law trumps, I don't hate to say the word Trump, but overcomes the state law because the federal government has a say in interstate commerce, that people who are driving from one state to the other should not be subject to Jim Crow laws under the federal law. So all of this probably, I'm not a constitutional scholar, but probably is also invalid under the Interstate Commerce Clause. So there'll probably be lawsuits about that as well. Going back into the Florida law, there are penalties for businesses and undocumented immigrants alike who violate new employment mandates. All of this will be in lawsuits. Whether or not judges put a stay on enforcing this legislation, we'll see in the end of July, early August. Supporters say it's going to expel the recent influx of immigrants who arrived in Florida and provide more job opportunities to citizens and others in the country lawfully. And critics say it will cost the state billions in lost revenue, while many of the harshest penalties are unlikely to be enforced. Now, if Florida is actually going to enforce all of these laws, this is what it's going to look like. To crack down on businesses hiring undocumented workers, SB 1718 is going to require private employers with 25 or more employees that are making new hires to use E-Verify, the federal online database that employers use to confirm whether someone is eligible to work in the United States. Samuel Santiago, a Florida director of the American Business Immigration Coalition, an advocacy group for immigration reform that benefits businesses, told NPR News that the change will likely have a significant impact on Florida's agriculture, orange groves, construction workers, and the hospitality sectors, industries where immigrants make up a vast majority of workers. And not allowing businesses to be able to utilize these workers will have a really big impact on the economy and the ability to create jobs in Florida. And that's a big problem for Florida, where there's already a widespread labor shortage. The unemployment rate in Florida is just 2.6% in April. So the supporters of this law says that this is going to open up jobs to American workers. What American workers? The unemployment rate is 2.6%. Ask any economist, 2.6% unemployment is full employment. The Florida Policy Institute, a nonprofit policy research group, estimates that without undocumented workers, the state's most labor-intensive industries would lose more than 10% of their workforce and the wages they contribute along with them. That could lead to a drop of $12.6 billion in gross domestic product in Florida in 1 year. That's a loss of more than 1.1% of the entire gross domestic product of the state of Florida, which would in turn cut workers' spending powers, reduce state and local tax revenue. There's been a wave of videos on social media showing images of vacant construction sites, vacant fruit and vegetable fields where harvests remain unpicked, and where fruits and vegetables are rotting. According to the video's narrators, the job sites have been abandoned by people who fear the new bill's e-verify requirements. A graphic on governor's website states that employers who fail to use the e-verify will be fined $1,000 a day. For workers, it will be a felony to use a false ID to get a job. The legislation clarifies that these penalties apply only after an employer fails to use the database 3 or more times within 2 years. And under the new law, a person who transports into Florida someone they know or should have known is an immigrant who has not been inspected by authorities could be charged with felony human smuggling. Now, a person who is found transporting fewer than 5 immigrants on their first offense could be charged with a third-degree felony. They can be sentenced to up to 5 years in prison or pay a fine of $5,000 or both. Now, you may be an American citizen driving your spouse who is undocumented into Florida. That would now be a third-degree felony. The Florida Policy Institute estimates that there are 130,000 U.S. citizens in Florida who are married to undocumented immigrants. That potentially is 130,000 felons. It is conceivable that under the law, a U.S.-born spouse traveling from out of state, as I just said, could be charged with a third-degree felony. Similarly, farm workers who travel together or with family could also be charged. Now, don't freak out. Nobody is arresting anybody for felony for being married to an undocumented alien tomorrow. Somebody eventually will get charged, and there will be a lawsuit, and it will go all the way up to the Supreme Court. And probably all of this will be on hold while this goes through the court system. But it is pretty scary stuff, what's going on in Florida. Thanks for watching. For more Brad Show Live, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.